Recording in progress.
Is now 5 o'clock. I would like to call to order the October 25th Development and Service Committee meeting to order. Madam Clerk, could you call the roll, please?
Pugh.
Here.
Horatio.
Here.
Barron.
Here.
English.
Present.
Newton.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Moving on to item number 2 on the agenda, approval of minutes from the September 27, 2022 meeting.
Move to approve. Second.
Discussion. Madam Clerk, could you call the roll for that, please?
Pugh.
Yes.
Horatio.
Yes.
Barron.
Yes.
English.
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Thank you, ma'am. Item number 3 on the agenda is adoption of the agenda for the October 25th meeting. I'd like to hear a motion.
Move to approve. Second.
Moved and properly second. Any discussion? Mr. Administrator, any changes?
No, sir, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, could you call for the vote, please?
Malinowski. I'm sorry. Pugh. Pugh.
Yes.
Horatio.
Yes.
Barron.
Yes.
English.
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Thank you, ma'am. Item 4 on our agenda, items for action. Item 4A, Community Planning and Development, Building Inspection, South Carolina Building Code Council mandate, 2021 code cycle. Motion.
Move to approve. Second.
Discussion. Mr. Malinowski, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On page 10 of this agenda, this is 4A we're talking about, correct? It lists 2 things. One, the 2021 building codes, appendices, and modifications mandated by the state. And the second portion, in the second paragraph, talks about the International Property Maintenance Code not mandated. I was looking through this information, trying to find where the dividing line was and where one stopped and the other started, but I didn't find it. Can somebody tell me what page it's on, or is it kind of all meshed together in there?
Mr. Chair, we have the Director of Building Inspections, Mike Zapp, in the audience. I'm going to actually have him come forward and address Mr. Malinowski, if that'd be okay with the chair.
Mr. Zapp, you recognize, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mike Zapp, building official for Richland County. What you see there is the mandated codes are the ones that the state has adopted and said that you will perform in your jurisdiction. Then they say you take property maintenance, for instance. Not every jurisdiction actually has a property maintenance. So those are what we call prescriptive codes, and they're actually covered in the state Code of Laws in 6-9-60, where it says the counties may adopt a reference only the latest editions of the following nationally recognized codes, and property maintenance is one. So that's where you get the difference, where that line you're asking about, that's where you get the difference between a prescriptive and a mandated code. So they're saying there's still a nationally recognized code. You don't have to use them because you may not have that program. But if you do, you can use that permissive code instead of drafting your own ordinance, to cover that whole program.
And now let's go.
Malinowski, you recognize.
Oh, thank you, sir. Now let's go back to tell me what time it is. The original question, where is it divided in all these pages here, or isn't it? With the first portion that's mandated versus the second portion that's not mandated. Do we have a dividing line out of all these pages?
Not in that document, only where I put in the agenda briefing to show you that that is a permissive code.
Okay, thank you.
Any other
For
questions?
discussion? Okay, so we have a motion and it's properly seconded. Madam Clerk, could you call for the vote, please?
You,
Yes.
Horatio,
Yes.
Barron,
Yes.
English,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Thank you, ma'am. Let's move on to item 4B, the Department of Public Works Engineer Division, the Comprehensive Transportation Improvement Plan. I guess is known as the CTIP budget, proposed projection for the fiscal year of FY23. Do I hear a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Any discussion?
Chair.
You recognize?
Yes, I would love it if staff could address this. I just have a few questions about the plan.
Mr. Chair, we have the Director of Public Works and Transportation here, Mr. Mike Maloney. Mr. Maloney, we actually have, it's Sharani Fuller. I didn't see you there. Going to have Sharani Fuller, who is also in that department, answer that. Thank you, Ms. Fuller.
Fuller, thank you very much. You're recognized, ma'am.
Thank you. Sharani Fuller, County Engineer, Public Works.
Thank you. Just a quick cough. And after that, looking at the plan, first of all, thank you for preparing this plan. I think this is, the third or fourth.
Yes, ma'am.
The third or fourth time that you've prepared this. So I think that this was helpful. I was just curious, looking at page 155 of our agenda, which lists it says RDM maintenance area road type mileage breakdown. You have 3 categories there: Ballantyne, Eastover, and Northeast. That's not a way that I'm accustomed to seeing the county divided. So is this only those areas? Is the whole of the county divided into these 3 areas? Can you just say more about these categories here?
Of course. These are the 3 areas by which our road maintenance department is divided. So there's a section camp for each of these 3. So for instance, in Ballantyne,
Sure.
There is a camp in that area, in the Blythewood area to take care, or in the Ballantyne area, to take care of to be more centralized with their equipment and their personnel.
Okay, so these categories represent where Richland County personnel
Yes.
is based to address it. Okay, and thank you. That makes sense because I was trying to figure out.
We have dividing lines so that they know they do crossover when needed, but they respond to the customer service requests based on the area.
That's completely fine. I didn't realize that represented the staff. And then in terms of how these priorities are made, my recollection, and I just want to confirm, is that as you look at allocating these dollars, you're making those based on the amount of county managed roads and or county paved roads in each area. And then you're allocating as a proportion for each district based on the number of miles. Is that correct?
That is correct. We're using the prorata per the ordinance, which based on paved county miles in each district, allots you a certain distribution of funding.
Perfect. And then my final question is for Mr. Wright, and you may not be able to answer this question right now, but is there an update on the road maintenance fee that you can share here in open session?
Well, as you know, that the State House did pass the bill, but there has been a lawsuit filed. So it's still a question mark at this point, but technically it was approved, but it is being disputed.
Thank you. And then as I understand the planning that you're making here, it's tentatively presuming that those dollars will be available.
That's correct. It is in our budget to use that money that is on hold.
Perfect. Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Chair.
So Malinowski, you recognize, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got, and I guess it's quite an administrative question because we're here in this committee and we're talking about the County Transportation Committee and grants. And in the next committee coming up, the Administration and Finance Committee, we've got an item on there that's dealing with County Transportation Committee. So I'm wondering why we have the same committee being divided up in two different committees here. The same County Transportation Committee and grants is being divided between two of our committees here.
This committee is just reviewing the plan, the CTIP plan for the next fiscal year of FY23. In A&F committee, you're looking at a specific project, Summit Ridge Summit Parkway, that received a grant, and we're looking to award that to a contractor.
And you don't think all these dollar amounts back here come under finance then?
I'll answer that, Mr. Chair. I think procedural wise, that's what's been done, Mr. Malinowski. If it's determined by one or the other committee that it'd be more appropriate to co-join these types of issues, staff doesn't have any issue with that because ultimately the county council will be approving or disapproving of the matter.
Sounds all right. Thank you.
That being said, we have a motion and a second. Madam Clerk, could you call the roll, please?
Pugh,
Yes.
Teratio,
Yes.
Barron,
Yes.
English,
Yes.
Newton,
Yes.
and approved.
Thank you, ma'am. Moving on to item 5A. Before we move on to item 5A, I would like to go on the record and apologize for an insensitive statement that I made the last time about this specific motion. I made the comment that this has been in committee for a long time, and I want to apologize to the staff and the previous chair of this committee. It definitely was not intended to demean anybody or their efforts to get this out of committee. And so I feel like if I was man enough to say it out in public, I am man enough to apologize. So I wanted to make sure I said that.
Hey, Mr. Pugh.
Yes, ma'am. So with that being said, is there any updates for item 5A?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I believe there's an update in item 5A, so I can make sure I'm looking at the right one. Is the item associated with absentee landlord ordinance?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. I'm going to actually ask Eric Jensen, Assistant County Administrator, to address the body.
Mr. Jensen, you recognize, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. ACA Jensen for the record. And it's nice to be on this side of the podium for once, and I can say hi to the nice folks over here. So good to see y'all. Very quickly, what you have before you today is an ordinance that has been prepared by the county attorney's office that, in my professional opinion, enacts the policies and procedures that this committee has asked us to do in terms of setting forth a registration system of what we are calling absentee landlords, which effectively means, per the definition of this ordinance, and any owner of property that is more than 50 miles from either Richland County or the property, depending on how we want to structure that. That was one of the questions that was brought up by Mr. Malinowski that we have discussed in the addendum that was attached to this. In particular, I just wanted to bring to the committee's attention that 50 miles is, I don't want to say arbitrary because it's not. It is a figure that is used by the federal government and multiple agencies to distinguish between local and outside of a jurisdiction or a distance. And so that it is my understanding that is generally why other entities have used this particular figure. I can't tell you where 50 miles came from originally. I just know that it has been a long practice within the federal government that 50 miles is beyond 50 miles is no longer local. So that is where this figure came from, and in my understanding, why multiple other jurisdictions across the country use this standard also. Other than that, one of the key things within this ordinance is the fact that any property owner would need to register their name if they do not reside at the property and their contact information so that county representatives could reach them in case of an emergency or a code enforcement action or some other need. Again, this is addressing just properties where the owner does not reside physically at the property. If the landlord and owner resides at the property, they would not need to register according to this ordinance. We're not proposing any fee associated with this. It would simply use existing county resources, our eTrack-It software or another program. And so there would only be minimal cost to the county in terms of implementing this particular program. Other than that, there was one other item that's that is separable, and that we are recommending that we change the standard from for a business license from 3 properties to 2. So right now, our current business license ordinance says that if you own 3 rental properties or more, you have to have a business license. We are suggesting changing that to 2. There is no reason, as Mr. Malinowski stated or requested, why it couldn't also be just 1. 2 is just, 3 is actually pretty typical across the country. But, 2 is okay, 4 is okay. Whatever threshold the council wants to set, as long as it's, reasonably defendable, that's acceptable. So, but it is our recommendation that we change it to 2 from the current 3. But again, that is a separate matter if you didn't want to address it independent of the ordinance itself. That is my report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Jensen. Ms. Barron, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to direct my question to ACA Jensen. And just to say, first of all, thank you for the background information that you provided us today. And so my question would be, as we look at capturing this particular data, we will depend on the landlord to actually provide us with this information. And then so in the case, and I guess I'm going, in the case of a landlord who maybe owns the property and may still have their legal residency at that particular property and another property. Now, we know that that should not be the case, but we also know that this happens a lot. Have we thought that far in advance to look at how we can make sure that we are able to gather that information for those individuals who may not have registered their property in the proper manner?
Mr. Chair, may I?
Yes, sir. You're
Thank
recognized, Mr. Jensen.
ACA Jensen. So Yes, but you bring up a good point that as we go through this process, assuming that council adopts this ordinance, we are going to come across situations like that. We have a tentative plan for rolling this out in terms of contacting and, going through our business license process. We already have a pretty robust business license database. We are also discussing reaching out to the trade organization, to the Realtors Association, Property Managers Association, and circulating this information through those groups. But I have every confidence, Ms. Barron, that yes, we are going to come across situations like that. And we will be using, obviously, our own internal assessors data to try to rectify those.
I may, Mr. Chair, have one.
Recognize Ms. Barron.
Thank you. And then so is it your recommendation that we need to look at the number of properties a landlord can have as a part of this ordinance? Is it your recommendation to loop those two items together or deal with it separately?
Mr. Chair.
Recognize Mrs. Jensen.
Thank you. Yes, it is our recommendation that you handle them jointly, but they are severable if you so chose.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair.
Recognize. All right, Mr. Administrator.
No,
I'm sorry, Mr. Attorney.
Yeah, just my recommendation though would be that you don't want different standards and different things. Like you don't want the business license to have one standard and the absentee landlord ordinance to have a different. So whatever it is, I recommend that they be the same.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Newton, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, ACA Jensen, for all of the work. This is an exciting moment for me. Yes, so I will say that there have been a lot of meetings and a lot of work on this. Questions when we talk today, so just to be clear, because this is an ordinance, this will require 3 readings and a public hearing. And just want to make sure that if there are any other subsequent items or actions that we need to take to make sure this goes into effect, for example, whether it's checking out our other ordinances as they relate to business licenses, what are the other things that we will need to do in addition to this ordinance for the intended effects to take place?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Recognize Mr. Jensen.
Thank you. At this point, the county attorney's office, they drafted this ordinance. And so I am confident that they have looked for conflicts and for other issues. But that is a good point that we should go back and look at it one more time and just make sure. I am not aware of any conflicts at this time. Having consulted with the business license manager, with the CP&D director, with the sheriff's office during this process, I am not seeing any conflicts at this point.
And just to be clear, I'm not necessarily referring to a conflict as much as are there other subsequent actions, or if when we pass this absentee landlord ordinance, do we then accrue, all of the benefits that we had hoped to? Because I know the outcomes that I was hoping to achieve when I wrote the motion, and I just want to make sure that when we pass this, that all of that will happen and that there aren't any other steps. Oh, well, you need to also pass this or change this rule. So I'm just making sure that it's complete in and of itself.
Mr. Chair.
All right, Mr. Jensen.
Thank you. I am not aware of any other steps that we need to take.
And that is a beautiful answer. Thank you, ACA Jensen. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Ma'am, any more discussion?
Yes, thank you.
Ms. Tracy, you recognize.
Thank you so much. I might be a little slow here, but on the on page 163, where we list second as necessary, amend the county code to the third bullet point down, and the second clause in that says require a business license for any person or entity that owns 2 or more owner-occupied residential units for lease, or require that person or entity that owns 2 or more non-owner occupied residential units for lease contract with a professional property management firm. Am I thinking about this right? Because if they are outside of 50 miles, then we are asking them to register their mailing address, phone number, email address, or is that, so all landlords that own 2 or more would have these items listed: address, phone number, email address. And then for those folks with outside 50 miles of the property, they are also registering or contracting with a professional property management firm. Can you help me understand the or in there? So if you own, so you either are here and have a business license yourself, or you're not here and you are contracting with a rental property management firm.
Mr. Chair?
Or am I just talking myself out of in circles?
No, those are great questions. So there are two issues. One issue is having a business license, and the other issue is having somebody within the 50-mile radius who can be contacted in an event or be served papers or whatever the issue is. And so there actually are professionals who are essentially just agents for folks, and so you can maintain a mailing address or a contact within a certain jurisdiction for those purposes. And so it is theoretically possible that a person may have a business license to operate their business, but may be located out of state, and so may also need to have an agent, a registered agent here within the 50-mile distance.
So those people have both,
Mhm.
but if you're within the property, within the 50-mile radius, sorry, may I do a follow-up, Mr. Chair? I already started.
Recognize, ma'am.
Thank you. So you're either outside the 50-mile radius and getting the business license and also having the agent, or you're within the 50 miles and just getting a business license and your property management is optional to you, or property manager is optional to you. Is that clear?
Yeah.
Ish?
Mr. Chair, if I may. And there's one more scenario where somebody may be outside of the 50-mile radius and contract with a registered property management firm here within the Richland County service area. So that's your third scenario.
Yeah.
Recognize, Ms. Allison.
Thank you. And so, and then in that case, the property manager would be getting the business license sort of on behalf of the landlord.
Mhm.
Okay. Thank you.
Ms. English, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Jensen, I just want to say thank you. This has been a lot of work, a lot of discussion, a lot of questions regarding legality, and I want to thank the staff for, this is really great. Thank you so much. And I do have some residents that will be kicking their heels about this. So thank you.
All right. Any more discussion? Okay. Let's move on to item 6 on our agenda. Well, first of all, I want to thank it's always a pleasure to have the Honorable Bill Malinowski sit in on our committee meetings. Thank you for joining us, sir. And as we move on to item 6 on the agenda, it was brought to my attention that items such as this should be brought to the Planning Commission first because it deals with the land code development. Is there a motion on the floor to send this to the Planning Commission?
I'll move,
So
Mr.
moved.
Chair. Second.
Any discussion?
Sorry.
Yes, Ms. Newton, you recognize.
Thank you. I apologize. I was getting a constituent complaint simultaneously. Which item are we discussing right now?
I believe it's 6A, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so, and I'm happy to vote to support this. I guess I was under the impression, and then this is my motion, that this was already sent to the Planning Commission. Is that incorrect? Are we required to take additional action?
I don't think you're required. I'm sorry, Mr. Chair.
Oh, you're good, Mr.
I don't
Minister.
think you're required to take additional action. I believe that as the item is currently listed, the chair may has been trying to officially move it off of the agenda item here onto the Planning Commission.
That's fine. I just wanted to confirm because I know actually they've already had meetings where they've discussed this, so wanted to be clear. Thank you.
Ms. Newton. Any more discussion? All right, so it's been moved and properly second. Madam Clerk, can you call for the vote, please?
Pugh,
Yes.
Ratio,
Yes.
Perrin,
Yes.
English,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Thank you. Moving on to item 6B. Ms. Newton, you recognize?
To read the motion, I like your style, Chairman Pugh.
It belongs to you, ma'am.
Well, this is an item that staff is currently working on, but the motion was to move to direct the administrator to conduct a review of the rank weeds and vegetation ordinance and recommend any updates that would improve the effectiveness of the ordinance, particularly as it relates to safety enforcement and blight reduction. I will ask, I know previously on some of our other agendas, when we have motions that are being worked on by staff, per our rules, there's been an update that just says, staff is working on this. We anticipate having a recommendation by XYZ time. Is there such an update as it relates to this motion? And if not, is that something that could be added to our agenda when this comes back before us?
There is an update at this time, Ms. Newton. Mr. Chair, I would recognize ACA Jensen.
Absolutely. Jensen, you recognize, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Very briefly, part of our I had a discussion with Councilwoman Newton earlier in regards to part of this particular agenda item. Just in general, weeds and vegetation ordinances are handled through simple quantitative measurements such as height and location and so forth. Sometimes you will find some communities will have lists of vegetation that is proscribed, meaning prohibited. And sometimes you will have lists that are permitted vegetation. The issue that, as I understand it at this point, is related to trees and large growth in particular. And that is a very particularly difficult issue to deal with, simply because typically, an ordinance has to relate to some governmental purpose, some legitimate governmental purpose. And so, typically you'll see things such as, growth over a certain height is prohibited, which is a very simple thing to enforce. We go out with a yardstick and we literally measure and we say it's over 12 inches high, and it's easy to enforce. In other places, particularly in more arid locations, the fire marshal or the fire chief will have an ordinance regarding the growth as it relates to fire hazards. So typically you'll see a standard of 10 feet that all vegetation within 10 foot of a property line must be cut below a certain height to reduce the likelihood of a wildfire spreading from one property to another or from one structure to another. Here in South Carolina, we have abundant vegetation just naturally, where our climate encourages lush green growth. And so those kinds of practices of requiring every property owner to clear the vegetation within 10 foot of their property line would be very impractical here. So we have to look at other ways to do that. And so we are looking right now at finding creative ways to address the issues that are germane to our geographic area.
And if I may, Mr. Jensen, yes, regarding my question, and that's completely true. There are also some other parts of the ordinance as well. Yes. I was just asking if for the next agenda packet, there could be, if it remains in items for analysis and discussion, if there's just some update regarding a timeline or what's happening, i.e. staff is investigating this and expects to come back at XYZ meeting. That was more of what my question was.
Hey, Mr. Johnson.
My apologies. We will do that then.
Thank you.
Any more discussion? All right. If not, let's move on to item 6C. This falls under the same information as the item 6A. Do I hear a motion to move this to the Planning Commission as well?
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
The concern I have with this item is it looks to direct the Planning Commission to do something or not do something. So, and council can't direct them to do or not do something.
I think we had this discussion before that we need to change what we got. Mr. Malinowski, you recognize?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I guess I should have been recognized prior to the county attorney getting up there because I noticed that also. And I was going to ask you if changing the wording to stating based on the below information, the Planning Commission should consider review and recommendation related to the new land development code and the urban heat island study in Richland County.
I probably would recommend, based on the below information, that this matter be referred to the Planning Commission
Their
to
review.
consider,
Yeah,
like heat islands, et cetera.
Mr. Wright, do you suggest that this this be rewritten and resubmitted, sir?
Yeah, it can be reworded that way and sent to the Planning Commission. That's fine.
So we're fine with taking this vote to send it to the Planning Commission with the corrections?
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Barron, you recognize? You good? Any more discussion? So is there a motion to move this to the Planning Commission with this correct verbiage?
I'll move. So move.
Second.
So it's been moved and properly second. Madam Clerk, can you call for the vote, please?
Pugh,
Yes.
Horatio,
Yes.
Barron,
Yes.
Newton,
Yes.
English.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Thank you, ma'am. I would also like to take the time to recognize the Honorable Joe Walker, who's sitting in the gallery. It's always a pleasure to have you with us, sir. And with that being said, let's move to I'm sorry, Mr. Administrator. Yes, sir.
I feel like you're getting ready to adjourn, Mr. Chair. Just one quick thing for
Yes,
the
sir.
benefit of this committee. There was a question earlier asked about the DPW item. I just want to point out my response was really specific to the council's rules. Council has a rule that speaks to where DPW items go, and they go to this committee. So if council wants to change this rule, I should have been more clear about that. To do something different, that was what I was trying to intimate, but I want to be more clear about that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Administrator. Any more questions or concerns? If not, do I hear a motion for number 7?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second. Madam Clerk, can you call for the vote, please?
Pugh,
Yes.
Barron,
Yes.
Horatio,
Yes.
English,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion approved.
All right, we adjourn. Thank you.